I think that they are signaling to the Republican base who they need to turn out in this election that they stand behind President Trump. And so they are doing it in a pretty dramatic way to try to make sure that they keep that particular sort of part of the party engaged, because they're going to need them to turn out to vote on election day.
Anything to add, Mike?
There are very few times in politics where you actually get to use the word lie, but this is one of those times. Senator Perdue and Senator Loeffler have just lied to Georgia voters by saying that Secretary of State Raffensperger has not been transparent. He's been the most transparent Secretary of State election official in the country. Georgia is an absolute model for how the public needs to trust the results of the election. And their vague, childish, insane assertion that he hasn't been transparent and their non-specific allegations of some sort of failure just indicate that they are completely desperate to hold on to President Trump's supporters by firmly planting their lips on his buttocks. That is what they are doing. And it is shameful. It is horrible. It is a disrespect to the voters of Georgia, and it is un-American.
Do you think that the illegal votes, do you think that that's just now going to be a talking point for Republicans?
Well, you know, the problem with the allegation is that it hasn't been met with sufficient factual data. And so the reason why these cases keep on getting thrown out of court is because judges don't find any evidence that would actually substantiate the charges that are being made.
But people don't seem to care.
Well, I mean, but they're also prosecuting this in the court of public opinion. And so despite the fact that the Trump campaign has encountered numerous setbacks in the legal cases that they brought so far, right, by putting this in the court of public opinion, they are trying to elicit sympathy. And they are misleading their voters into thinking that this election outcome is likely to change when all of the evidence points in the direction that it is not going to change. And so it's actually doing a disservice to voters because it's not allowing them to properly mourn the loss and to actually just get used to the fact that, you know, the administration is going to be changing and that there's going to be a turnover of power.
Mike?
Andra's used the word evidence judiciously and appropriately, and that's what we need to see. You can make all of the allegations about voter fraud and conspiracies and stolen elections you want. If you don't have actual evidence, you're just whistling in the wind. And the evidence, when it is actually presented to a judge, has been, I can't think of an example that hasn't been thrown out. You know, you keep digging through a pile of manure, hoping that because it's such a big pile, there's eventually going to be a pony under it. That's just not happening. There's no evidence of fraud. There's no evidence of voter suppression. There's no evidence of stolen elections. There have been a lot of changes about how we vote, but it just hasn't materialized into anything that would hold up into a court of law, let alone, and I'll tell you this, turn over an election. The standard for ballot fraud is extremely high. You have to find enough questionable ballots to have affected the outcome of the election. And there are hundreds of thousands of ballots out there in contested states where if you found 10,000, you couldn't change the outcome. You couldn't change the outcome in Georgia. It's just not going to happen.
One more question, I will let the two of you go. Do you think that what Senator Perdue and Loeffler, when they did today, when they put this out, do you think that hurts, helps, or in the long run won't really matter when it comes to the runoffs?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it riles up their base, which is what they wanted to do. They also didn't want to incur the wrath of President Trump, so they don't want the angry tweet that could jeopardize their electoral chances. But what they failed to take into account was that this could also be used to mobilize Democrats to vote against them. And they were already sort of in a situation where they have to assume that the Democrats and Republicans are basically going to run even in this contest. And then there's the larger question of what their longer legacy is going to be. So what does it look like if they win their races and then they now have as sort of, part of their bio or as part of, what's going to follow them for at least the near term in their careers, the fact that they made allegations against a member of their own party. Right. So, when I thought about this, I thought about Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican. Right. So, I mean, they this was burning a bridge, and I don't know in the end if it's worth it for them to do it.
Anything else to add before I wrap things up here today?
Yeah, in addition to being utterly false, Perdue's and Loeffler's allegations today were nonspecific. They had no evidence whatsoever. And what they've done is cast aspersions over the entire voting process in Georgia. Now, that may be smart to sort of rile up the base and own the libs or whatever nonsense they were thinking was a good campaign strategy. The reality is that if you're a Trump supporter and you're looking to vote in the runoff, but your candidates, Loeffler and Perdue, have said, oh, it's rigged, it's non-transparent, the guy should resign, why would you vote at all? They could literally have just lost this election by depressing their own voters into saying my vote doesn't matter because the system is rigged and fraudulent and false. It's stupid in addition to being un-American and dishonest.